I'm Olivia, 29 years old, and I've lived my entire life in Brooklyn, New York. It's funny how much a name can carry, how many times I've heard people say it with disbelief, as if they couldn't understand why I had the audacity to exist in the same space as them. As if my skin, covered with patches of white, wasn't a constant reminder of something they couldn't comprehend. Some people just don't know how to deal with difference. I have vitiligo, and my skin isn't uniform. In a world obsessed with symmetry, I was always out of place. I knew it from the moment I could understand the difference between what was considered beautiful and what wasn't. I never had a chance to blend in. I can still hear their voices, those whispers when I would walk past. The laughter that was always just a little too loud, the eyes that lingered a second too long. When I was younger, it hurt. It felt like I was the wrong kind of person in a world full of people who had it all together. No one told me directly, but I could feel it. I knew. There was always this unspoken understanding that my brother, Tyler, was the one who mattered. He was the one everyone looked at when they talked about our family, about success, about beauty. He was tall, with flawless skin that reflected the sun like a perfect porcelain doll. He was everything I wasn't, and because of that, he always got everything. Even now, after our father passed away, nothing had changed. He still came first. I watched the will reading, my hands tight with the paper I gripped as if it could anchor me to reality. I was sitting there, surrounded by relatives and family friends, all of them looking toward Tyler as the executor of our father's estate, as the one who would inherit the house, the money, the business. And then, like it was just the obvious thing to say, one of them spoke up. Well, it's clear, isn't it? Everything goes to Tyler. He's the one who's going to carry it all forward. He's the one who'll make sure it lasts. He's beautiful. The word hung in the air like a slap. Beautiful. It was the same word they always used when they spoke of him, like his appearance was the only thing that mattered. They didn't say it out loud, but I knew. I was the one who had always been in the shadows, the one who didn't matter enough to take up space. I was the one who never even got the chance to be noticed. As they all continued to nod, agreeing, I felt the coldness creep in. It wasn't just the house they were giving to Tyler. It was everything. The unspoken understanding that I wasn't the one who was meant to get anything, that my name wouldn't even be considered when the decisions were being made. The weight of it pressed on my chest like an unshakable burden. I didn't speak. I stayed quiet, just like I always did. I had learned not to fight it, not to draw attention to myself. People didn't like it when I spoke up, not when I wasn't the pretty one, not when I didn't look like everyone else. I had lived my whole life being quiet, retreating into the background. I had accepted it, accepted being less than. But something snapped in that room. It wasn't the words they said. It wasn't the way they looked at me. It was the realization that I didn't need to stay quiet anymore. It didn't matter if my skin wasn't perfect. It didn't matter if I was always the one who was overlooked. I had spent my whole life feeling invisible. And now, for the first time, I realized that I didn't have to be. I didn't need them to decide my future for me. I didn't need their approval. I had already done the work. I had already taken the steps, quietly, behind the scenes, while they looked the other way. I didn't need their permission to claim what was mine. Tyler might have been the one who was always in the spotlight, the one who they saw as the future of the family, but I had been building something too. It wasn't the house or the business that I wanted. It was something more, something deeper, something they never noticed. They wouldn't understand it now, but soon enough, they'd see. They'd see that there was more to me than just what they could see on the surface. I had already bought it all. They had never even seen me coming. I remember being a child, always standing in the shadow of my brother. It didn't matter where we were, Tyler always seemed to shine brighter, his skin flawless, his smile effortless, everything about him a perfect reflection of the world's expectations. I wasn't ugly, but I was different. That difference was something people could see, even when they didn't want to. My vitiligo was like a map of everything I wasn't, a permanent mark on my skin that told a story I wasn't ready to tell, a story that I didn't want anyone to see. As a little girl, I wanted so badly to be like Tyler, to have his perfect skin, his easy confidence, the way everyone would turn and look at him when he entered a room. But they never looked at me. I wasn't invisible, but I wasn't important either. It wasn't that I wasn't loved. I was. But there was always this silent hierarchy that existed between us, between me and Tyler. He was the one who mattered. He was the one who could have anything he wanted, and I would just have to be content with whatever was left over. Even at home, it was as if our father had written the script of our lives before we were even born. He always made sure Tyler got the best of everything, the best clothes, the best opportunities, the praise that I could only dream of. Meanwhile, I was always in the background, a footnote, a reminder that beauty and success weren't meant for everyone. It was as if I were constantly competing against a perfect version of the world that I could never attain. When I turned 16, my father had taken Tyler to one of those exclusive summer camps for the rich and beautiful. It was meant to shape him, to turn him into something even greater than he already was. I didn't get to go. I had no reason to go. Instead, I spent that summer in the silence of our house, watching the world outside continue without me. That summer, I realized something that changed everything. I realized that I wasn't just in my brother's shadow. I was in my father's shadow too. Everything was always about Tyler, and when my father spoke of the future, it was always Tyler's name that he said first. Every plan, every dream, was built around Tyler's image, as if my presence was merely a side note, something that didn't even need to be acknowledged. I hated the way it felt. I hated the way they talked about me like I wasn't enough. The way people would look at my skin, almost as if they were too afraid to ask questions, too afraid to stare for too long. I could feel their discomfort, their unease, and it crushed me every time. I began to retreat more and more into myself, pulling away from the world, watching Tyler live a life that was handed to him on a silver platter. And still, I stayed quiet. I stayed quiet when our father's friends would talk about the future of the family business, as if I didn't even exist. I stayed quiet when Tyler got all the praise, when he took credit for things I had worked just as hard for. I stayed quiet when everyone acted like my skin didn't deserve to be part of the picture. But even in the silence, something was brewing inside me. Something I couldn't keep hidden any longer. After our father's death, it became even more apparent how much of the world was built for him. Everyone believed that Tyler would take everything, that his perfect skin and flawless image would ensure he inherited the world. No one saw me. No one even thought to ask what I might want. I watched as they all looked at him, as if he was the one who had earned it all, as if he was the one who would carry the legacy forward. But I had been watching too. I had been calculating, moving in silence, making decisions in the background that no one even noticed. I knew what I was doing, even if they didn't, and I knew that sooner or later, it would be my turn to step into the light. The moment I realized that I wasn't just in my brother's shadow, that I wasn't destined to live in his perfect image forever, was the moment I understood my own power. I wasn't invisible. I was just waiting for the right time to show them that. They never saw it coming. They never saw how carefully I had been planning everything. They didn't know that I was already one step ahead, quietly claiming the very thing they thought belonged to Tyler. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't understand, was that I wasn't trying to take anything from him. I was just trying to take back what was mine, the things they had overlooked. I had already started the process, long before anyone had even realized. It was time to stop standing in the shadows. It was time to step forward and take control. I had always been aware of their eyes on me, the way they watched, scrutinized, and measured everything about me. But I didn't realize until later how much of it had become second nature, how I had learned to ignore the way their gazes lingered, how their discomfort danced across their faces whenever I walked into a room. I had always felt different, but there was a time when I couldn't fully understand why. It wasn't just the way people looked at me. It was how they looked through me, like I didn't even exist in the way they saw everyone else. I had never been invisible, but I had never been truly seen either. I spent so many years thinking it was my fault, that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't worthy of their attention. I didn't realize then that it wasn't me, it was them. I had spent so much of my life staring at their faces, trying to catch something, anything, that might tell me what they saw when they looked at me. But I never could. I had learned to be quiet, to blend into the background, to let my body and my skin speak for me in ways I didn't want to. They didn't see the girl underneath the surface, the one who was intelligent, who worked hard, who could be strong. They didn't want to. The discomfort was easier to ignore. What they saw was the surface. What they saw was my skin, those patches, those white marks that they couldn't understand. Every time I walked into a room, I could feel the way they recoiled just slightly. It was like a breath held, a moment of hesitation before they continued, pretending that it didn't bother them, pretending they weren't looking at me differently. But I could always tell. It was in the way they shifted uncomfortably, the way they glanced away, the way they talked to everyone else but never truly to me. It was the subtle exclusion that hurt the most. I could feel the weight of it every time we sat at a dinner table, when they exchanged polite conversations with my brother, but never once did they ask me anything of substance. They would ask him about his latest project, his latest trip, and I would sit there, nodding, smiling, a piece of furniture, not truly part of the conversation. Even in family settings, I was never quite there. The joke was always on me. Even when they tried to be kind, I could see it. They didn't want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, the thing that made me different. It was as if they thought ignoring it would make it go away, but it never did. And it wasn't just the strangers or acquaintances who treated me that way. It was my own family, too. My father, always so proud of Tyler, never once noticed how I had worked just as hard, how I had always been there, how I had spent so many hours in the background, making sure things were taken care of. But he only saw Tyler. Tyler, who didn't need to try as hard, who didn't have to fight against the world's perception of beauty. Tyler, who didn't have to fight to be seen. When I was younger, I would catch my father's gaze when he looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes, the disappointment, the unspoken belief that I wasn't what he had hoped for, that I wasn't the daughter he had imagined when he dreamed of his legacy, that I was just something that didn't fit, something that could be pushed aside without anyone noticing. I had lived with that, and I didn't even realize how much it had shaped me, how much I had come to believe in the lie that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of being seen. I had learned to expect it, to accept it. It had become a part of me, the way I expected to be overlooked, expected to fade into the background, just like the way people saw my skin as something less than perfect. But then, something inside me started to change. I started to notice things that I hadn't before. I started to see the way they treated me, like a shadow, like a forgotten part of the world they didn't want to acknowledge. I realized I had been accepting it for so long because I didn't think I could change it. But I had been wrong. I had been wrong all along. There was so much more to me than the skin they saw. There was so much more to me than the things they judged me for. I had always been enough. It wasn't their eyes I had to worry about. It was mine. It was the way I had looked at myself and allowed them to define me, allowed them to decide who I was. That was the moment I decided I would stop letting their discomfort dictate my life. I would stop pretending to be what they wanted me to be. I would stop hiding in the shadows. I started to see the faces of the people around me in a new way, not as something to avoid or something to fear, but as people who couldn't hold me back anymore. Their judgment didn't matter. Their stares didn't matter. What mattered was what I was going to do next. What mattered was how I would change the story. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was drowning, as if I had no place left to hide, no way to escape the suffocating weight of everything. I watched as Tyler walked through the door, like a prince reclaiming what was always meant to be his, as everyone smiled and congratulated him, praising him for the things he hadn't even done. He was the perfect heir, the one everyone thought would take control, the one everyone believed could handle our father's legacy. Meanwhile, I was left behind, a forgotten part of the family, ignored and cast aside once again. I had no idea how to change the story. I had no idea how to break free from the cage I had lived in for so long. The anger that had once fueled me, the determination to prove them wrong, now seemed to slip through my fingers like sand. Every step I took forward felt like 2 steps back. The people who once looked past me now watched me closely, not with curiosity or admiration, but with pity. I had thought I could play their game, that I could rise above their judgment and their expectations, but it felt like every move I made only dug me deeper into a hole I couldn't climb out of. The more I tried to take control, the more I realized how impossible it was. I was never going to be seen the way I wanted to be seen. I was never going to be the person they valued, the one who mattered. It wasn't just Tyler who had the perfect skin, the perfect life. It was the world around me, this system that worked against me, that had always worked against me. Nothing was ever going to be fair. I was never going to have the same chances. I started questioning everything. Was it worth it? Was it worth fighting for something that was never going to change? Every time I thought I could break free, I felt myself being pulled back into the same old patterns, the same old expectations. They were right all along. I was just a shadow. I wasn't important. I was never going to be enough. The frustration ate away at me, gnawing at my insides, a constant reminder of the barriers that had been built around me. Every time I tried to take a step forward, it felt like the world was pushing me down. I watched as Tyler took everything, not just the inheritance, but the respect, the admiration, the love that had always been reserved for him. And I wondered why I even bothered anymore. What was the point? I had spent so many years trying to prove myself, trying to be seen, and for what? So they could look at me, acknowledge my existence, and then forget about me all over again? I was so tired. I was tired of fighting a battle I didn't think I could win. The world had already decided who I was. They had already placed me in a box, marked me as different, as less than. My skin, my appearance, had defined me in ways that I couldn't escape. It was always there, always the first thing people noticed. I had spent my entire life trying to convince myself that I could change that I could be something more, that I could make them see me as more than just a body with imperfections. But every day it became clearer that it was never going to happen. I would always be the afterthought, the one they tolerated, not the one they respected or admired. The weight of it all threatened to crush me, the pressure so heavy I couldn't breathe. It felt like my future had already been written for me, and it was a future that didn't include anything I wanted. I could hear my father's voice in my head, see the way he had always favored Tyler, see the way he had dismissed me without even realizing it. I had never been good enough in his eyes, and now, after his death, nothing had changed. Tyler was the one who would carry on the family name. Tyler was the one who would take what was left and make it something. And I was just nothing. The anger that had once burned so brightly inside me now felt like a distant memory, a flame that had long since been extinguished. I had no fight left. I had no hope. All I had were the empty stares of the people who would never understand me, who would never see me as anything more than the girl with the strange skin. It was a reality I had tried so hard to escape, but now it felt inescapable, a prison I couldn't break out of no matter how hard I tried. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run away, but I didn't. I stayed. I sat there, silent and broken, watching, as everyone celebrated what they thought was inevitable. They didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. But at that moment, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. I had no future. I had no way out. And I felt like I was drowning in it. I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere in the depths of that suffocating despair, something shifted inside me. It was so subtle at first, like a whisper I wasn't sure I'd heard, but the longer I let it settle, the more certain I became that it was real. For so long, I had allowed myself to believe I was powerless, that my skin, my imperfections, defined me in ways I couldn't escape. I had let their looks, their pity, their dismissal of me shape my every move. I had accepted the role they handed me, the one where I stayed invisible, stayed small, stayed in the background. But I was tired of being pushed aside, tired of pretending I didn't care when every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. I had spent my whole life waiting for a moment when I could prove myself, when I could step into the light and be seen for what I truly was. But all I had ever done was wait. It was that moment, sitting in that room, surrounded by people who thought they knew what I was capable of, that something inside me clicked. It wasn't a loud, dramatic revelation. It wasn't a moment of triumph or glory. It was quiet, almost a whisper, but it was a truth I hadn't been able to face before. I wasn't the victim of my circumstances. I wasn't powerless, and I certainly wasn't invisible. I had been playing their game, allowing their judgment to dictate my life. But the truth was, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to be seen the way they wanted me to be seen. I had something they didn't know about. I had strength, a strength I had been hiding for so long, waiting for the right time to unleash it. I didn't need to fight against the world anymore. I didn't need to wait for them to see me. I just needed to take what was mine. It was a terrifying thought, realizing that all this time, I had the power within me to change everything. I had always felt like an outsider, always believed that the world was designed for people like Tyler, the ones who didn't have to fight for attention, who didn't have to prove their worth. But I was wrong. The world wasn't built for him. It wasn't built for anyone. The world didn't care. It didn't care about his perfection or my imperfections. It only cared about who could stand up and claim what they wanted. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I was just as capable of doing that as anyone else. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to hand me anything. I wasn't going to sit in the shadows anymore, hoping someone would notice. I had already been doing the work, quietly, behind the scenes. I had been planning, moving in ways they didn't even realize. While they thought I was just waiting for scraps, I had been building something of my own. The inheritance wasn't important. The house wasn't important. The business wasn't important. What mattered was me. What mattered was my ability to claim what was rightfully mine, to step into my own power, and take control of the life I had always been denied. I wasn't going to let Tyler, or anyone else, dictate what I could or couldn't have. They didn't see me as a threat. They didn't see me as someone who could change the game. But that was their mistake. The moment I realized that I didn't need to wait for them to notice me was the moment everything changed. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about proving it to myself. I had spent too long believing that I didn't deserve anything, that I was somehow less because of the things that made me different. But I wasn't less. I was more. I had more strength than they could ever understand, more resilience than they could ever give me credit for. I was done playing by their rules. I was done letting their opinions define me. I had already started to make my move, quietly, without them knowing. They were too caught up in their own expectations to see the truth. They didn't realize that I was already claiming what was mine. And when they finally did notice, it would be too late. It wasn't just about money or property or inheritance. It was about me taking control of my own life, carving out a space for myself in a world that had always tried to make me small. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't weak. I wasn't the girl in the background. I was the one who was going to change everything. I had already started. It all came together in that moment. All the planning, all the quiet moves I had made behind the scenes came to a head. I had spent so much of my life watching from the sidelines, waiting for someone to acknowledge my worth, waiting for someone to see past my skin, past the things they assumed about me. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had already done what they never thought I could do. I didn't need to be the one who was seen as perfect, the one who fit into their narrow idea of what success and beauty should look like. I had something far more powerful than any of them realized. I had the will to take what was mine. The day it all changed was the day I walked into that room, and this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to notice me. I wasn't sitting in the back, quietly hoping to be acknowledged. This time, I was stepping into the spotlight, not asking for permission, not waiting for someone to see me as worthy. I had already made my mark, and it was too late for them to ignore it. They had spent so long thinking that Tyler was the one who was going to take it all, that Tyler was the one who would continue the family legacy. But I had already quietly bought the business, already made the connections, already set everything in motion. They didn't see it. They didn't understand it, and they never would. It wasn't about the inheritance. It wasn't about the house or the property. It was about something deeper, something I had always known was inside me but had been too afraid to bring to the surface. It was about the strength to claim what I deserved, to take the life I had been denied for so long. As they looked at me, their faces full of confusion, disbelief, I could feel the weight lifting from my chest. I wasn't the girl they had once overlooked, the girl they had once dismissed as nothing. I was the woman who had fought for herself, the woman who had found her own path, the woman who was finally going to take her place in the world. Tyler stood there, still beautiful, still perfect in their eyes. But I didn't need to be like him anymore. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had built my own legacy, one that didn't need to be defined by anyone else's expectations. I could see the realization dawn on their faces. They hadn't seen it coming. They had underestimated me, thought I was just the girl with the strange skin, the one who didn't matter. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I had grown, I had changed, and I had learned that my worth was never defined by their gaze. It was defined by me. I wasn't just claiming what was rightfully mine. I was claiming my place in this world. I was done being the afterthought. I was done hiding in the shadows. I was done waiting for someone to give me permission to exist the way I wanted to. I had already done it. I had already proven that I was more than just the skin they saw. I was more than what they thought of me. I was a force in my own right, and I had just taken my first step toward showing them all who I really was. In that moment, I realized that it was never about the money or the inheritance or the recognition. It was about the power to define myself, to decide my own worth, to take control of my own future. I didn't need them to see me. I had already seen myself, and that was all that mattered. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't weak. I was strong, and I was ready to face the world, on my terms. The world would never look at me the same way again. I had already changed it, and that was only the beginning.